Chad Everett Broshears. I am the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Now, I want to preface something here real quick because the title of this particular episode is Ignorance, Pros and Cons. There is something that I want to preface, and that is, first off, that we are living in some pretty trying times at the moment. We do have a lot going on. We have a lot of frustration, and if you've watched any of my videos, you know how I feel about frustration. Just a general quick recap, but there's another video that actually is dedicated to talk more about frustration. But frustration is like gasoline. You can either pour it all over yourself and light yourself on fire. As an analogy, please don't do that. But treat frustration as if it were gas, or petrol for my friends and family across the pond. Or you can put it into a vehicle and use it as a way of eliciting, change or helping you get closer to your goal. Frustration by itself typically is not enough of an energy source to get you to your goal. And if it does, and your goal's long enough, it actually may spoil the result. It may change you or change the goals, the end result of your goal. So I do want to make sure that this is something that people are aware of. I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I'm not a licensed counselor, anything like that. I have a very deep desire to know as much as I can about a lot of things. But at the same time, psychology is one of my favorite topics. I love to talk about long-term consequences of behavior, as well as being able to basically help us all kind of navigate through life in a way that we can reduce our frustrations in the negative sense and increase our desirable outcomes and rewards without harming another person to achieve it, or negatively impacting somebody in a way that isn't required for behavior change. And when I say that, I'm not, to really put it back into that preface again, with everything going on right now, we are dealing with some things like, looting. There's protest to looting to rioting. Protest to rioting and then looting going on currently, with hopes that this thing dies down pretty quickly. But one side wants to be heard, and everybody wants to be able to come to a peaceful resolution. So as far as that's concerned, I'm not referring to rioting, and I'm not referring to looting. If you feel that you would like to protest, by all means. It's a way of communicating, and when you protest, you still have the ability to have discourse. Rioting is not easy to discourse, and it's very destructive overall for a lot of things. So, okay, back to the topic at hand. We're talking about ignorance. Now, ignorance itself is innocence. Ignorance does not have a polarity yet. Ignorance is something of, you just don't have exposure to or knowledge of something. It's the blind spot of knowledge is what ignorance is. It is not a negative. I've heard it used in negative connotations. I've been called ignorant in my life. But as an adult now, I realize ignorance is innocence. You just don't know something. You haven't been exposed to something. Now, for me, I like working definitions of things. So when somebody says stupid, I want to understand what stupid is by undressing the statement. I want detailed value. I want definition to it. I don't want to just say, oh, well, that's intended to be an insult, because it doesn't make any value to me if it's only intended to be an insult, other than creating undesirable emotional experiences or reactions. I'm not a fan of that. I'd rather have some sort of detailed value to it. So my working definition, and what I mean by working definition is that it's applicable in my life and I can use it immediately. My working definition of stupidity is arrogant ignorance. It's when you don't know something, but you're stuck on what you don't know by justifying it by something else. So again, it's arrogant ignorance. Oh, I know I don't know something. Or, you may have facts, but I just don't want to believe it. That's ignorance, but it's backed with an arrogant stance. And that is unteachable. Now, it doesn't mean that the person can't, like, you can't get through to them over time, but at that moment, they may have an emotional barrier stopping you from being able to get to help at least understand the situation better. So you can understand the situation enough to realize that there's probably a good degree of hostility. Stupid also usually has a degree of hostility associated with it. It's usually not a very benign or very easygoing and desirable type of thing. Stupid can come across as being aggressively arrogant about ignorance. So that's my working definition about it. I don't make the person undesirably wrong necessarily. I do at times also realize I need to move my resources away from that individual, myself physically, or maybe the support that I might offer that person through conversation or financial or whatever it might be that would be one of my resources for them. And I move it away from them enough that I can safeguard myself and my resources so that I'm not stuck in a way that I'm losing something or I'm taking on more damage than I need to, or more harm than I need to. So whatever that looks like, again, this isn't just a violent concept. It could simply be that somebody's just stuck on it. By the way, when somebody is, you can be momentarily stupid. You can be momentarily arrogantly ignorant. You can absolutely do that. It doesn't mean that it's defined you as being stupid or arrogantly ignorant. It just simply means that you're just in a moment where you're stuck on something. And cognitive dissonance is a very uncomfortable thing. For people that aren't aware of cognitive dissonance, it's where you have two conflicting ideas that are uncomfortable to compare and they both can't be true at the same time. Oh, it's very uncomfortable. It requires focus, attention, energy. And a lot of times you have to put the focus into it to better understand it. And it can challenge belief systems that are associated with that. So therefore you don't want them to come to an arc, if you will, and the arc is this uncomfortable. So especially if it's deeply invested or rooted into an ideology that you've built into part of your character description for the world, where you align with specific, using political parties as an easy example, but there's plenty of different places you can assign yourself. You could say, you have a deeply democratic belief, and then you also have a deeply related Republican type or conservative type belief. So you have a liberal and a conservative belief at the same time, but in different departments or different categories. And then as soon as they come closer to each other, where they actually will have overlap, where they both require, it can go to the other side, but because the belief system starts so far in another place that it causes the other side, once they come across each other, it makes you feel extremely uncomfortable. That's cognitive dissonance overall. It's something that it's an interesting thing. I've experienced it, and undoubtedly, if you're over the age of 12, you've experienced it as well. Probably experienced it even younger than that, but recognizably experiencing where you can reclaim it and go, oh wait, that actually was something. That's what he's talking about. Okay. Pros and cons to ignorance. Now let's get away from the arrogant ignorance for now, and we're going to get back to ignorance being innocence. Now, the pros to it is you really shouldn't have a high degree of responsibility in ignorance because you haven't been exposed to it yet. You're unknowing about something. Now, that can be a pro to it. Also, they say ignorance is bliss. I disagree completely, but I also love to learn. So whenever I hear ignorance is bliss to the person pulling the strings or manufacturing the situation. Not for the person being taken advantage of, in the sense that they're the ones that somebody else is able to get around or get something from them or whatever. Like a magician doing a trick. That's a very benign sense of like what I'm talking about here. They're non-threatening type of things, but they've pulled the fast one on you by a sleight of hand. That's a concept where it's just that's somebody who knows what they're doing to an ignorant person to how to do it. If you know how to do it, you spot it when they're doing it, and you can either go, that guy's pretty good, or gal, whoever, is pretty good. They move very quickly, and I didn't necessarily see it as clearly, but I saw the tip, and I know, like the tipping or the tilting of the hand enough that I know what they were doing. That would be because you understand it. You're not ignorant to the trick. You were just in awe of their ability, their skill, their speed. That would be an easy one to look at. But whenever it comes to ignorance is bliss, it is bliss for two parties, but it's only bliss for the ignorant the one that truly doesn't know, as long as they don't know, but the consequences can still show up around them. It can show up, but they have less money, or it shows up because somebody has been able to run around and do whatever the heck it is that they want in that person's place of ignorance. So on the other side, the person that's able to orchestrate the situation can continue to get away with what they want to. This is also what a lot of people are referring to when they say that, like our government is doing X, and, or the conspiracy theory concepts or the Illuminati or whomever are doing things. They're like, well, that's, because they're taking advantage of us. And because they have these kind of advantages, they can stay where they're at, and we're the one paying the cost. You can say that. I'm not saying that those conspiracy concepts are true. I'm not saying they're false. That's not my game. I'm not playing that one. I haven't had enough exposure or time or concern enough to say I want to focus on this whenever I have more immediate focuses I need to do here. I need to make sure my bills are paid. I need to make sure that my family's taken care of and they're good and healthy and well, and that they're up to something so they're not dealing with too much misery. As you've watched some of my videos, if you have, you realize that being up to something is a purpose value, and it does give reward, where if you're not up to something, misery usually fills that role. Fills in that space. It's just discontent and undesirable types of emotions. So with this, ignorance is bliss to both parties, but the one pulling the strings is the one that gets usually the long-term benefit. Now, the person that is the one being manipulated, if you continue to stay ignorant in that area, you're likely to continue to be manipulated. It's just the way that the systems work with human nature. You can take the nicest people in the world, but that's also why you can see a lot of these, nonprofits and organizations that are there to try to help people. They may start off in a really good place, but a couple of little tricks later on, get the right people in place to either focus on profit or whatever it is. Next thing you know, the organization doesn't want to dissolve, so therefore all the money you put in to try to create a cure may actually, or try to create a very viable treatment, they're disincentivized to do that. But if you don't know what the money's going to, they're very likely to continue to basically absorb the money and do whatever it is they want to do. By the way, little hint, I don't much care for donating to charities typically. I know plenty of people that run charities that I'd rather give the money to them because I know what they're up to. I know them as a person. But anyway, that's a digression. Now, that's, again, because of knowing people that are in the charity industry. They do give insight, and when you start learning how to read some of the public information, which all nonprofits in the United States have a reporting system, they have to publish their earnings and where they spend their money. What they collect and spend and what they do with the money, they have to publish that. But there are categories that do hide some things, but only if you're interested, go look. You'll see those categories start to show up through different organizations because they're all structured very similarly as far as the business machine, if you will. Okay. Ignorance is bliss. The cons to ignorance is, again, you can be manipulated consistently if you stay ignorant. The pros to it is it sometimes feels nice not having to stress over the things that other people are stressing over because they know something. The pretty short end of the story there is that's pretty much it. Pros, being ignorant, it's not as uncomfortable initially until you find out you've been taken advantage of. Then that changes. The cons are also the back end. But once you've dissolved ignorance, you learn something. The thing about why people don't like to also accept new information in the state of ignorance is not always cognitive dissonance. It's sometimes also the fact that now they have to be responsible someplace that they have not historically had to be responsible because they didn't know, therefore you don't have to be responsible. Once you're aware of it, you can no longer plead ignorance because ignorance is not something that once it touches, like the knowledge of that touches it, ignorance is gone. Now you still may have less knowledge about that thing, but the focus point has now been shifted and you can see where something has been illuminated to you. Now it's a matter of you to actually pursue it further, but the person that can be blamed, the only person that can be blamed at that point is you. Even if other people are taking advantage of you, it's time for you to learn. If anything, we can always start a hashtag grow up, hashtag develop, hashtag grow together. I'm out for growing together. I'm not sitting on a righteous high horse. There's plenty of things that I don't know, and I absolutely want to be able to help as much as I can. Excuse me. Every time I get into these conversations. Okay. I want to see a difference in the world. I don't think we need to burn it all down in order to see it. Oh, I think there's a lot that we can do if we can just engage with each other. Let's be the difference we want to see in the world. Let's engage each other in a way that we can have something that we could all look back at with pride and all look back at and say we worked together to create that. So let's let the dissolving of ignorance by knowledge take place. Oh, I thought earlier today, how radical would it be if I invited people over to read a book with me? Now, I'm not saying read the Bible or any other religious text or anything like that, although I did quote the Bible today, and there's some wisdom in that book. I'm not out to down it. I'm not out to promote it. But some of my friends that know me well, as soon as they found out, they're like, "What? Really?" Yeah, absolutely. We can learn from each other all the time, and we have a lot of history that we can learn as well if we just crack the pages. So, yeah. So with that, maybe it would be a pretty radical thing to just invite people over to have a conversation about certain things. We can sit and talk about, open a book on psychology and read a couple of, pages worth and go over what we know, what we think we're learning out of it, what we're seeing as insights, how we can see this to be applied into our life, and how radical would that be? I wouldn't care. Gender, I wouldn't care skin color, I don't care about anything. I just care that you would want to come over and be a good person. Just come over and be like, I stand for a change in my community. I stand for a change that we can all come together with. That would move me to tears. Oh, it kind of starting to. As I've said before, I didn't read anything outside of assigned schoolwork until I was in my mid-20s after I graduated. I didn't bother. I wasn't excited about it. I wasn't engaged through the schooling systems that really made me want to read more. It wasn't until after. And then I picked up Robert Kiyosaki, of all people, right? I picked up his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the writing style. I enjoyed the way it engaged me. And then from there, I have a library in my home now. I mean, it's not a massive, rolling ladder that you climb up and all the rest of that. It's nothing like that. But I have two bookshelves that are pretty much full. I like reading now. I like learning. And I'd like to be able to pass that on to as many people as possible. Let's try that as a radical approach. Even if it's not in person. We could try it, set this up with friends, family, people on Facebook or whatever social media that you're using or whatever it is, and put it out there. I want to see a change, and I really want to be able to do this with you. It's the same concept as a book club, but I'd like to turn it into something a little more targeted. I'm not good with finances. Let's get a book on finances. Let's talk about where we currently are and where you want to go with finances, and see if there's something that, somebody might have an insight. I'm not saying I'm not good with finances. I mean, I definitely could be better. If you follow my maturity program that I've published on this channel, you'll see that we can always mature in different places. But what a fantastic idea. Do something that's a little more targeted. I want to get better in this place in my life. Are you up to it? Do you want to do it with me? Let's take it on. Yeah, I like that. We're all in this together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close up the episode. But I do want to thank you. I absolutely thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you take something away from it, please share it in the comment section what you're taking away from it. I really do enjoy getting comments and finding out where people are. I know that I do talk to people outside of the comment section in this, and regularly telling me what they're taking from it and how it encourages discourse in their family or friends. These times we kind of need this. we owe it to each other. Instead of getting caught up in all the outrage and the frustration. If we want to make a change, let's start with ourselves. Let's learn our way through this thing. Let's do it in a way that doesn't create more harm than necessary. And when I say than necessary, I mean like maybe a little bit of emotional upset occasionally, but sometimes that's just because we're attached to something and we don't want to see it change. That's it. Thank you again for taking the time. Thank you for everything that you've done, whether I know about it or not. We don't need to set fire to our world in order to make it change. We can do it together. All right. With that, please like the video. Smash that little like button. It doesn't matter what format you're on. You should have a like option on it. And share it. Comment. Share it. Sit around, sit around with your friends and family and listen. Jump into the conversation. Pause it. Talk to each other. Let's build ourselves back up again in a way that nothing else matters. The identity politics are done. Let's get them out of our lives. Let's get back to being human beings again without these identity values that make people want to separate. So, all right. With that, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to our next video. This is Chad Everett Brochures. I'm the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Thank you so much again,